I still remember the smell of smoke clinging to my hair, the crackle of fire swallowing the night. My lungs burned as I screamed for help, certain those flames would be my last memory. But then, arms, strong and certain, wrapped around me. He pulled me out of the chaos, his voice steady, promising I was safe. For a moment, I believed him. I believed everything about him. I didn't know then that the fire wasn't the only danger waiting for me. Sometimes, the worst flames aren't the ones you see, they're the lies someone hides behind their smile. Welcome to the Untold Love, a space for heartfelt stories that touch your soul. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Emma was the kind of girl who noticed the quiet things other people missed, the way sunlight slipped across old wooden floors, the shy tremble in a stranger's smile. At 24, she lived alone in a small lakeside town, her life stitched together by handwritten stories and the scent of coffee drifting from the cafe beneath her apartment. Most people knew her as the quiet one with the notebook, always scribbling, always somewhere else. But inside, Emma carried a storm of words she hadn't yet found the courage to release. Liam entered her life on a windy afternoon, during a community safety seminar at the town library. He stood at the front of the room in a navy blue shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, talking about fire safety with a confidence that felt effortless. His voice wasn't loud, but steady, like someone who could calm chaos just by standing still. There was a warmth in his eyes, a shade of amber that caught the room's light and held it. Emma sat in the second row, pretending to take notes but secretly watching him. He made people laugh, even when he spoke about serious things. When he looked her way, just for a heartbeat, something inside her stirred, like pages rustling before a story begins. After the seminar, people gathered around him with questions. Emma lingered by the shelves, tracing her fingers along the spines of old novels. She didn't expect him to notice her, but as the crowd thinned, Liam walked over. "Are you always this serious when you listen?" he asked, a playful curve to his lips, "or was I just that boring?" Emma laughed, startled by how natural it felt. "I was paying attention," she said, hugging her notebook. "I just think a lot." "Well," he replied, leaning slightly closer, "thinking is good. But sometimes you've got to step out of your head." They talked for a few minutes, about books, about how he loved volunteering with the fire department, about the lake that looked different every morning. His words were easy, but there was a depth in the way he watched her, as if he was reading between her lines. When Emma finally walked home, her notebook pressed against her chest, she realized she'd written nothing during the seminar. Yet a new story had already begun, one she couldn't wait to see unfold. The night everything changed began quietly, almost tender in its stillness. A thin autumn moon floated above the lake, silver ripples folding over themselves like pages of an unfinished poem. Inside her small apartment, Emma curled on the couch with a book and a cup of chamomile tea, the scent of dried flowers drifting through the room. Outside, a faint wind pressed against the windows, whispering secrets she didn't bother to hear. Then, something sharp, a faint crack, like wood snapping in the distance. She frowned, set the mug down, and sniffed the air. At first it was subtle, only a shadow of smoke, but it thickened fast, sliding under the door, curling up from the corners of the ceiling. Her heartbeat stumbled. She rushed to the window, saw a glow in the stairwell, orange, restless, alive. The fire alarm shrieked, piercing the quiet. Panic clawed up her throat. She grabbed her phone, dropped it, tried again, her fingers clumsy with terror. The hallway was already a blur of heat and haze. Neighbors' voices echoed somewhere beyond, muffled and frantic. Emma covered her mouth with her sleeve, but smoke filled her lungs anyway, bitter and heavy. She took a step forward, then another, coughing, eyes streaming. The stairs were blocked, flames snapping at the railing like wild animals. For a moment she froze, her body trembling against the wall. Thoughts scattered, her parents' laughter, unfinished stories, the lake at dawn. Was this how it would end, quiet words swallowed by a greedy fire? Through the roar, another sound reached her, a strong, commanding voice cutting through the chaos. "Emma." She turned, barely seeing him through the smoke. Liam. His silhouette was sharp against the blaze, a heavy jacket thrown over one arm. He strode toward her, eyes steady, face streaked with ash. "Come on," he said, draping the jacket around her shoulders. "Stay close to me." His hand closed around hers, firm and reassuring. Together they moved, his body shielding hers from falling sparks. He guided her through the haze, step by deliberate step, until the cold air outside struck her lungs. Emma gasped, the night rushing back, the stars, the lake, the world still waiting. Liam's arms steadied her as she trembled, his voice a quiet anchor. "You're safe now," he whispered, and for that heartbeat, she believed him completely. The days after the fire passed in a haze of gratitude and fragile calm. Emma found herself replaying the moment Liam had pulled her out of the smoke, the strength in his arms, the steadiness of his voice. She told herself she only wanted to thank him properly, yet her heart fluttered every time she imagined seeing him again. They met at a quiet cafe a week later, the one near the lake where the glass windows caught the morning sun. Liam arrived in a worn jacket, hair still damp from a shower, carrying a warmth that seemed to follow him everywhere. When he smiled, Emma felt something loosen inside her, as though she'd been holding her breath for years. Their coffee stretched into an easy conversation, books, music, the odd ways life surprises you. He listened with the kind of attention that made her feel visible in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. When she teased him about his heroics, he laughed, shaking his head. "I just happened to be there," he said, but the glint in his eyes suggested more, an instinct to protect, one he didn't brag about. Soon their meetings became a rhythm, Saturday walks along the lakeshore, evenings watching the sky bruise into sunset, lazy Sunday breakfasts where they shared stories about their childhoods. Liam talked about volunteering, about long shifts at the firehouse, about how calm the world looked from a ladder above the roofs. Emma shared pieces of her writing, shy at first, then braver as he encouraged her, telling her how her words carried a quiet strength. There was a gentleness in the way he touched her elbow when crossing the street. The way he remembered how she liked her tea. The way he looked at her as if she were more than just a girl scribbling stories in a notebook. Yet behind his laughter, there were moments when his gaze drifted toward the distance, shadows flickering in his eyes. Emma noticed but didn't press. She sensed a depth in him that needed time. One evening, as they sat on the dock watching the moon ripple across the water, Liam reached for her hand. Their fingers laced together naturally, as though they'd always known how to find each other. For the first time in years, Emma felt steady, like maybe love wasn't just something she wrote about. Maybe, with him, it could be real. At first, the changes were so small Emma almost convinced herself she'd imagined them. A missed call here, a late reply there. Liam would smile, apologize, and say the firehouse had kept him longer than expected. She wanted to believe it, wanted the calm they'd built together to stay untouched. But little shadows began to gather between their laughter. Sometimes, when she asked about his past, Liam's eyes would flicker, guarded for just a heartbeat before he steered the conversation elsewhere. He was still tender and attentive, still the man who had carried her from the smoke, but there was a quiet distance she couldn't name. One evening, they were at the cafe, rain sliding down the windows in thin silver threads. Emma told him about a new story she was writing. He listened, but his gaze wandered toward the street. When she asked if something was wrong, he smiled too quickly and said he was just tired. The smile didn't reach his eyes. Then came the night she overheard two firefighters at a market stall, their voices low but clear. They mentioned Liam, how he was still untangling that old mess, how it might come back to bite. Emma froze, groceries clutched in her hands, their words echoing louder than the rain against the roof. Back home, she sat at her desk, staring at a blank page. Questions pressed against her ribs, insistent and heavy. She remembered the way he sometimes pulled away when she leaned in too close, the way his phone would light up with messages he never opened in front of her. When Liam arrived later that night, soaked from the storm, she wanted to ask. The words trembled at the edge of her lips, but his tired smile silenced them. He pulled her close, holding her as if to erase whatever doubts were rising between them. For a moment, she let herself sink into his warmth, but unease still hummed quietly beneath her skin. Emma had always trusted the stories she wrote to reveal themselves slowly, line by line. But with Liam, she sensed there were chapters hidden in shadows, waiting to surface. And though she tried to steady her heart, she couldn't help but wonder if she was standing at the edge of another fire, one she couldn't see, but already felt burning somewhere deep inside. The quiet questions Emma had been carrying finally grew too heavy to hold. One sleepless night, while rain tapped gently at her window, she opened her laptop and searched for Liam's name. She wasn't sure what she hoped to find, maybe reassurance, maybe proof that her unease was nothing more than fear of losing someone good. But what she found made her breath catch. A local news article from 2 years ago, volunteer firefighter ends engagement amid scandal. The words were blunt, stripped of the warmth she knew in him. The story hinted at betrayal, at broken trust, at someone who had promised forever and then disappeared when things grew complicated. Emma closed the screen and sat motionless, her heartbeat loud in the stillness. She wanted to believe the man who had carried her out of the flames couldn't be the same man in that headline. But doubt, once planted, is a seed that grows quickly. The next evening she asked him to meet by the lake, their usual place. The sky was bruised purple with dusk, the water calm enough to mirror every flicker of light. Liam arrived, hands tucked in his jacket pockets, his expression unreadable. "I found something," she said quietly, holding his gaze. "About your past." His shoulders stiffened. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them, long enough for the breeze to scatter tiny ripples across the lake. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I should have told you," he admitted. "I wasn't ready. I thought if I kept it buried, maybe it couldn't touch us." He explained, haltingly. About a relationship that had fallen apart after a series of mistakes, how he'd let someone down. How rumors twisted the truth until even he didn't know which version people believed. He told her he'd left town for a while, ashamed and unsure if he deserved a clean slate. Emma listened, her chest aching. She wanted to forgive, yet part of her wondered if this was only a fraction of the story. She searched his eyes for the man who had saved her, for the steady warmth she'd trusted. But all she saw was a man standing in the fading light, caught between honesty and fear. Leaving her unsure which fire she needed to escape next, the one in his past. Or the one now flickering inside her own heart. The days after that conversation moved slowly, like mist lifting from a quiet lake. Emma tried to lose herself in her writing, but her thoughts kept circling back to the shoreline where Liam's words had hung between them like fragile glass. She replayed every glance, every pause, the tremor in his voice when he'd said, "I wasn't ready." She wanted to believe that love could be enough to cover every fracture, yet deep inside she knew trust was the soil where love grows, and theirs had been scorched. Morning light became her balm. She began rising early, slipping out with her notebook to sit on the dock as the sun spilled gold across the water. At first, her pages filled with questions and ache, but gradually her words softened, shaping stories of quiet strength, of people who learned to stand again after falling. Liam sent a letter one afternoon, folded neatly, his handwriting slanting gently across the page. He wrote of regret, of how he'd hidden parts of himself not out of malice, but fear that the truth would send her running. He thanked her for the moments they'd shared, for the laughter, for showing him a kind of calm he hadn't known he needed. Emma read it twice, tears smudging the ink. She tucked the letter inside her journal, not as an invitation back, but as a way to honor what had been real. Love, she realized, doesn't always demand a lifelong story. Sometimes it's a chapter meant to teach you how wide your heart can stretch. With each passing week, her steps grew lighter. She redecorated her small apartment, filling it with plants and sunlight. She met friends at the cafe, laughed again without the weight in her chest. The fire that had once threatened to consume her had become a quiet ember, teaching her resilience rather than fear. On a soft evening, she walked alone by the lake, watching the sky bleed pink into indigo. She whispered a silent goodbye, not bitter, not angry, just a release. Some flames burned to destroy, others to illuminate. Liam had been both. Emma turned toward home, heart steady, ready to write a new story, one where healing wasn't a destination but a gentle, ongoing choice. The first hints of spring brushed against the town, softening the sharp edges of winter. Emma walked slowly along the lakeside path, her scarf trailing in the breeze, a journal tucked beneath her arm. The world felt gentler now, as though it, too, had learned how to breathe again after a long season of holding its breath. She stopped at the end of the dock where everything had once begun, the place where Liam's laughter had blended with the hush of water, where hope had felt so close she could almost taste it. Standing there now, she let the memories drift across her mind like fallen leaves carried by the current. For the first time, they didn't sting. They felt like a song she had loved once, still beautiful even though the last note had faded. She remembered the way Liam had pulled her from the smoke, how steady his hands had been, how his eyes had searched hers that night by the fire truck's flashing lights. Whatever mistakes had come after, that moment had been real. Emma opened her journal and slipped out the letter he'd written, the paper worn from being read too many times. She traced a finger over his words, then carefully folded it closed, sliding it back between pages filled with new beginnings. She understood now that some people arrive to teach you something, to wake up the part of you that has been sleeping. Liam had done that, reminded her of courage, of tenderness, of the way love can both heal and hurt. But she didn't need to stay in that story to keep its lessons. A small smile curved her lips as she watched sunlight scatter across the lake. The girl who had once hidden behind notebooks had walked through smoke, through heartbreak, and found herself on the other side, steadier, clearer, still open to wonder. Emma turned from the dock, her steps light against the wooden planks. Ahead lay a path lined with budding trees and the quiet promise of more chapters waiting to be written. She didn't know who might walk beside her in the future, but she knew this much: her heart was strong enough to meet whatever came, carrying the warmth of what had been and the hope of what was yet to bloom.